Welcome back. We are painting Tern Tern Tern. This is a watercolor, and where I last left off was doing the background. You can see that I've taken off some of the masking fluid from part of this. You don't need to watch me peel off this stuff all the time. So I just left this one bird. This is my rubber cement pickup. And I'm just gonna rub this. Sometimes if you get it started, you can pull it. Just rub it off. You can also do this with the roll of tape like I showed you before. Okay, this is just a piece of tape that's been rolled so that the sticky side is out. And you just go ahead and rub it off. You can rub this with your finger. Just make sure that your hands are clean if you do this. Though I recommend if you have a large area that you use something else like an eraser or a rubber cement pickup or the tape, because it will kind of rub your finger raw. But it comes right off, and you can see how nice and clean the paper stays. Now you can put this over watercolor, as I said before. You do lose a little bit of color when you lift off all the rubber cement, but not so much as you're really going to notice. And you can always do touch-ups if it really bothers you. Now, what you want to do after you've got all the masking fluid off is that you run your fingers over the paper, and you can feel where you may have a little bit left over because it feels kind of tacky to touch. And you just pull that off. Now, as you remember last time, I used some salt on here. You just brush it off. You can brush it off with your fingers. Make sure that your hands are clean. And if you're working with watercolor, don't use hand lotion that's got oil in it. That oil will get into your paper and cause a lot of problems. Or you can take a dry brush and just brush it off, and it's no big deal. You see that there are a few little speckles because I did get a little bit of overspray on the white part when I was doing some of these sprinkles in the back here, but it's not something I'm going to be worrying about because I still have to paint the birds. But I'll show you. A lot of people think watercolor is difficult or hard or something. It has its challenges, and I would just assume that you change that thinking from hard or difficult into a challenge. This is just water on my brush. I'm just kind of lightly going over that clean paper towel and just lift. Down here, some of the paint got into a place where I may not necessarily want it. Just a damp brush and lightly go over it, and it lifts right off. So it really bothers me when somebody says, oh, watercolor is difficult. It might be a challenge, but it's no more difficult than anything else. You just have to learn what it does and how to fix it. It may be a little more stubborn than some of the other mediums of paint, but you will be able to fix things or learn how to work around an area. So now I want to get started on the base for my birds. Bring this here, and show you. Now if you look at the photograph, you're going to notice that very little of the bird is actually white. There's a little bit of pure white on their chest, a little bit of pure white on their head, but everything else is some different color. Mostly in shadows it's going to be a blue or a blue-gray or a lavender gray. So that's what you need to think about. So and also I want to come here and put another wash of color too. Now yes, I still have my dirty palette, all right, but I want a little bit cleaner color, so I'm just going to lightly spray that. I've already sprayed my paints for the day, and I'm just going to wipe some of that off. I usually work on a kind of a dirty palette. I'm going to take my 3/4 inch, this is my angle brush, just going to take some ultramarine blue, because I want to change the color of that bottom section just a little bit. So I'm just adding some water and getting kind of a thin wash of color here. That's all I want to do. I just want to tint what I have, because I think it's a little bit too light and a little bit too brown. So I'm just going to come in here and just paint right over that. Now remember, you don't want to judge your watercolor when the paint is still wet, because it's going to look totally different once it's dry. Watercolor dries lighter, and what looks pretty blue right now will kind of be influenced by the tan that's underneath it, and it'll change to a more of a gray color. So that's all I'm going to do. That's why I'm not too concerned about some of these little things. I can just take the damp brush and just blend them out. There's going to be some weeds and stuff that I'm going to put in later, but that's all I'm going to do there. Now I'll start on this bird. Now what I'm going to do is I'll show you how to do one bird, and then I'm going to break away and I'm going to do the other two birds, so that I'm not spending all day painting birds on video. But you can go back and review it if you need to. So I'll bring this back up here because I want to show you how I'm going to mix this. Again, this is going to be a wash. I'll probably do a couple of washes. This is my ultramarine blue. I'm going to pick up a little bit of burnt sienna. That just kind of graze it a little bit. And to that I'm going to add just a touch of alizarin crimson. I want it kind of a soft lavender color. A little more water. It's better to sneak up on a color, you know, doing it in layers, rather than trying to go for the color that you see. So on this bird, I've got my reference photo just in front of me so that I can see it, and I'm going to test it here. I think I need a little bit more water in that, but I'm just going to rinse my brush, and just with the water on my brush, especially right up in there, it's not too dark. I just picked up some more paint, and I'm going to come around and just pull that right in. Picking up some more paint. Down in here it's a little bit darker because it's under the bird. Under his wings there. Rinsing my brush. This is still my 3/4 inch brush, and this is just water on my my brush, and I'm just pulling that paint up and around. There's, oops, I need to pick up some paint, same color, right under his beak here, or bill. I guess it's a beak. I'm going to come around his head. I'm not too worried about getting it up here. This is going to be black anyway. My reference material is right in front of me, so I can see exactly where I need to put this. Put that down, rinse my brush, and then with just water on my brush, that's all that I have here, I'm going to go right along the edge and pull that in. Kind of move the edges, make it a little softer. Picking up a little more paint, because right in here it's a little bit darker. It's a shadow where his face changes contour. And then I'm just going to leave that dry. Right in here is still the paper white. Everything else has had paint put on it. And if you pat, like you see my brush kind of just tap on there, that leaves little marks where the paint has been, and that will give some texture to the birds. I'm not going to do a lot as far as creating a lot of feathers or anything, but that will help suggest feathers. So I'm going to take a little break now and let that dry, and I'll be right back. Okay, as you can see, I've come in and I've done the other two birds. I got them all to about the same place as far as getting the shadows in. One of the things when you're working on any project, watercolor, oil, acrylic, whatever, you want to try to bring things up at the same time rather than concentrating and finishing like this bird before starting the other two. What happens is that you spend so much time worrying about this and fussing with this that by the time you get frustrated and go, oh, I better work on the other two, these two will suffer, and then your whole painting will suffer. So bring things up at the same time so that everything looks at the same level. You know, if you are trying to finish this one and these two aren't done, this one's going to look out of place in your mind. But if they're all kind of in the same spot, then you know what you have to do. I know that sounds a bit confusing, but it does work. You know, I didn't, a lot of things I learned over the course of years, and I was as guilty as anybody for trying to finish something as I went. But when I started working around my painting and bringing it all up at the same time, there was a huge improvement. Okay, so I've got those done. I'm going to try to bring everything up at the same time. So bring my palette back here so you can see it. Now this is the color that I was working with. For the underpainting for the wings, I'm going to just add some more blue. This is my ultramarine blue. I only use what's on the equipment list that I have on my blog page when I'm doing lessons, although I do have several other colors on here, so when I'm painting for myself I will use them. But for my lessons I try to stick with what I've put on the equipment list so that you're not wondering where I'm coming up with some of these colors. So this is my burnt sienna. And I kind of want to keep this on the cool side, which means it's going to be a little bluer rather than brown, which is warm. And yeah, there's still some of that alizarin crimson that was in here from before, and I'll just mix that in. But this is going to be my underpainting. I've switched to my 1/2 inch brush for this. Now let me test this. So I'm going to start here on the back. Now I think it needs to be a little bit bluer, so I'm going to add some more ultramarine blue to that. A little more water. Come back up here. And I've got to remember to paint around the beak because there's a beak here. And then right in here it gets a little bit lighter. I have my reference photo right where I can see it. It's just right above, a little bit out of frame, but it's right there, and I'm constantly looking back and forth to it. So I'm just going to come in. This is that blue-gray. This is underpainting. This is going to change in the next lesson or two. I just want to get this underpainted. Underpainting is like the foundation for your painting, and it's very important. Some of this will become highlights or lighter areas. You create some texture with this. Just going to take and blend that out a little bit. There's a little bit of blue right up here on his forehead. And when I go off, I'm rinsing my brush and then I'm drying it off, so I don't have a real wet brush. It's just a damp brush. And just kind of softly blend the edges. A little bit of that blue right up in here. I just put it down. I'm rinsing my brush, drying my brush so it's just damp. It's not real wet. And then right at the edge, just kind of softening the edge with my brush. Now I want to underpaint the beak here. I'm going to leave the eye, that beak. Bring this out here so you can see it. This beak is kind of it's got a little bit of kind of a golden orange color here, and it goes into a red. So when you're painting in watercolor, you look for the lightest areas first. So the light area on this beak is kind of a golden yellow color. So I'm bring this up here. This is my palette. I've already got some yellow here and a little bit of orange. I'm just going to take and kind of blend the two, add a little bit more yellow to that. That's why I keep a dirty palette, because a lot of times what I need is right there, or just needs a little bit of modification. So it's just going to be a little bit of yellow, a little touch of orange. Now see, by going to my orange, I picked up way too much orange. By picking it up off my palette, I was able to control it better. So I'll just go back in, pick up some yellow, maybe even wipe a little bit of that off. Let's try it again. And I actually like to make mistakes when I'm teaching, because that gives me a chance to show you how to fix it. So I just picked up some more yellow, picked up the orange that was already on my palette, and blended it in. That's going to be my underpainting for the beak. So I'm just going to come in and just kind of touch that. See, that's that kind of golden golden orange. Now you can do this with a round brush if you prefer working with a round brush. I just have gotten used to these angle brushes. I can come in and underpaint the rest of these while I've got it on my brush here. This is just underpainting. This will change, but it will influence what I do later. That's what watercolor is. It's transparent. So some of this golden color is going to influence what I put on top of it. And like with all other things in watercolor, I have to let this dry now before I start anything else. I will come back in and I'll do the wings on the other two. And then I think we'll have one more segment for this lesson. And then we'll come back again in another segment. Thank you. I'll be right back. Okay. As you can see, I've come in and I've gotten the other two birds up to the same place as I did the bird that you saw me demonstrate here. Now, one of the things about watercolor is that if you start painting close to an area that is already wet, you can get what's called a bloom. There's a little bloom right there. You know, there's little blooms. I don't worry about those too much, but sometimes you get them in places you don't want. So if you're trying to find out whether or not a area is wet, use the back of your hand, because you can feel if it's cold. If it's cold, that means it's drying. If it's just kind of neutral, then it's ready to go. So that's one little thing to remember. Now I'm going to underpaint the legs here, and for that I'm just going to take, I'll bring this back so you can see. I'm just going to take and this is just my burnt sienna, and over here in a corner I'm just going to take a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of my ultramarine blue. This time I want it a little bit warmer, so it's going to be a little bit more on the burnt sienna side. And whatever mud happens to be there, this is my 1/2-inch brush again. And water. Water makes it thinner, which will make it lighter. That's how we make light colors in watercolors. We add water to it. And again, this is just underpainting. All right, I want you to understand that. This is just underpainting. So I'm just going to come in, and I can do all the bird legs because there's not too many bird legs, or at least not a lot of area. And just underpaint with this kind of a gray blue or gray tan color. Now if you've downloaded the picture and bring it up, you'll see that there is a little bit of a change of color on these legs. And so that's all this is going to be, is just where it's going to pick up a little bit more light than the other areas. Okay, now what I want to do also is I want to get started on like the beak, and since these beaks are very small, I've made a bigger version here, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Okay, here's my palette again. And again, down here I've got some orange. I've also got some red. This is my cadmium red here. You can use either cadmium or you can use the naphthol red. I think I'll use the naphthol red. And down here, mix it with a little orange. If you don't, the cadmium red would probably be good on its own. But I'm mixing it with just either the cadmium red or the naphthol red to get kind of this orangey red. I'm adding a little bit of water to it to thin it down. Then I want to come up here and I want to start where it's darkest, which is right up. There's probably going to be just a little hint of a shadow right under where the feathers are. And I'm just going to add this color. Now I'll paint the birds in the project here off camera because they're small, and this is what I'll be doing. Maybe I'll paint one so you kind of believe me when I tell you what I'm doing here. But I just want to come up here. I've got the picture in front of me. It's darker on the bottom, so I'll pick up a little more paint. Now you may want to do this in sections. I paint a little faster so I know what's going on. I'm going to rinse my brush, set my palette back, and this is just water. Just going to take the water and just blend that color up. The paint, that wet paint, will flow into the water that I'm putting on there. And I do have a little bit of color on my brush. And I'm just blending that up. Now I may have to do this again, picking up a little bit more of the color. Putting it back in here. That was that red-orange color, because this is a darker part of the beak. Rinse my brush and then just move the paint with a damp brush. This is one of the things I love about watercolor, is that you can do things like this that are a little bit more challenging to try and get a similar effect with in other mediums. You can get close, but watercolor is just kind of, well, it was the first thing I learned how to paint with, and so it's probably my favorite. So I'm just moving this around, just water on my brush, and then I'll just let that dry. So all I did, that was the underpainting here, and then I put the red orange on it, and then I moved it with my brush. So I'll come down here and pick it up. This is the same bird. Just put that red orange on his beak. Could get a smaller brush, it would make it a little easier, but I can use the point, and then just water to move it. So I'm going to finish those up. I think our next segment will be moving forward. So if you need this reference material, go to the blog spot, and it'll give you a link to the picture and the drawing. Also on the blog spot you'll find an equipment list and the paints that I use. So just remember to stay safe, call your neighbors, call your family, stay in touch with your friends, and Just hang in there. We're all going to get through this, and we'll be better for it on the other side. Take care.